Bruce Wayne had Dick Grayson, Zack Fair had Cloud Strife, Master Splinter had the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and now the Lian Evo has the Evo RGB. A new PC case to take up the mantle of its predecessor. With all of the stylings of its mentor and a few splashes of its own flair, can the Lian Evo RGB be more than just a flashy Evo? Well, let's find out. With new AIOs, cases, and fans, which we'll talk a little bit later, you can see a little bit of a peek there, it has been a renaissance year for Lian. We are totally here for it. We've reviewed the o11 Evo XL, the o11 Vision, two of the new Galahad 2 AIOs, and today we are checking out the latest case in Lian's lineup, the o11 Evo RGB. Now, this isn't just Lian slapping some RGB fans into a pre-existing case and calling it a day. This feels like a unique case in the company's lineup and a replacement for the older o11 Evo, though it does seem to take some of the notes from the o11 Vision, which we'll talk about along the way. Now, the Evo RGB is available in both black and white, with the black case retailing for $159.99 and the white case, of course, being more expensive for $169.99. As far as dimensions go, the Evo RGB is about 11.4 inches or 290 millimeters wide, 18.54 inches or 471 millimeters tall, and 18.8 inches or 478 millimeters deep. Size-wise, it's very similar to its predecessor, the o11 Dynamic Evo and the o11 Vision, but not as large as the Evo XL. For case I/O and controls, the Evo RGB has two USB 3.0 ports, one USB Type-C port, and a combined audio/mic port, as well as power and reset button. It also has color, mode, and brightness controls on the right side of the case for the diffused RGB that lines the front and left edges of the case. These glorious RGB strips have 14 lighting modes and 5 levels of brightness, which can also be controlled through a 5-volt RGB header and its software. If we look at the back of the case, the o11 Evo RGB takes some notes from the o11 Vision and its bumped out PSU mount. Not to be outdone, the Evo RGB has a matching bump out of the hard enclosure. We've given Lian a bit of gruff in the past for not having enough space for cable management. This is a bit of a creative solution for making up some internal space, but up to you if you like it or not. Speaking of internal space, let's move inside of the case. The o11 Evo RGB supports micro ATX, mini ITX, and ATX motherboards, as well as eATX motherboards under 280 millimeters or 11 inches. If you need help figuring the size out, that's roughly the length of a plantain or a kitchen knife, which you could use to slice a plantain. The motherboard tray has two positions that it can be shifted to. They are separated by about an inch, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later. As for GPUs, the o11 Evo RGB has support for GPUs up to 455.7 millimeters or just under 18 inches in length. In other words, the Evo RGB can accommodate some big GPUs. But if you've been around the channel, you know what I'm gonna say next. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. Let's wait for thermals before planning what monstrosities you can cram in here. Speaking of cooling, the Evo RGB can fit 320 millimeter or 140 millimeter fans at the top, side, and bottom of the case, or one 120 millimeter fan in the case rear, which people have complained about. We kind of wish there was a 140 back there. As for CPU coolers, the case has options to mount up to a 360 millimeter radiator at the case side and bottom. However, if you're looking for massive cooling, the Evo RGB comes with a mounting bracket that supports a 420 millimeter radiator at the top of the case, so you can keep the existing bracket in there or use up to a 360 millimeter rad. But good to see 420s, and that's going to be great for overclocking 13.9 or 14.9 builds, or 7950X builds. As for PSU support, the Evo RGB can accommodate ATX style PSUs up to 220 millimeters in length, which accommodates most standard PSUs with some spare room for cabling. Like we mentioned earlier, it does have the slight bump out of the back to give a little bit more space for cabling, but like every other Lian we have reviewed this year, this space fills up quickly. But you know what fills up even quicker? My joy for every new person that smashes that like button and whips that subscribe button and rings the notification bell so you don't miss out on videos like this one. Seriously, we love helping people out with cool tech, and if you like this content, we'd love to have you around. As for hard drive mounts, the Evo RGB has a hard drive cage that sits right above the PSU. It can support two 3.5-inch hard drives or two 2.5-inch SSDs, as well as mounting spots on the cable management cover for 2.5-inch SSDs. It's like the Lian signature card, like the Wet Bandits from Home Alone, but not as not as destructive. Now, if that wasn't enough space for storage, there are 2 extra mounting plates that can be installed on the side fan bracket for 2 3.5-inch drives or 2 2.5-inch drives, which this thing comes set up with that, which was kind of weird. If you need that many drives for storage, just get a network attached storage drive and be done with it. Don't worry about using the brackets. But you know what? I'm not going to be someone who tells you what to do. We like all PC builds here. We're very inclusive of PCs. One more quick note. In case the Evo RGB isn't open enough for you, the support post in the front left-hand corner right here can actually be removed. It's something they've done in both their Evo XL and in their Vision. So if you're debating on getting whether to get this or the o11 Vision or the Evo RGB, the Evo RGB can kind of do what the Vision does, but you know what? It has that not open top and you can actually cool out of it, which in this case might be a good thing. All right, now it's time to see what the student has learned, and if the student has become the master, let's look at the thermals. While idling, the o11 Evo RGB averaged 28 degrees Celsius on the CPU and 26 degrees Celsius on the GPU. Those numbers position the o11 Evo near the NZXT H9 Flow and the H6 Flow. This is really a good sign for the Evo RGB, considering that the H6 Flow has been one of the most performant cases we have seen this year. However, it still has a little bit to learn from the Evo, which had slightly better GPU temps than the Evo RGB. Still, not a bad first showing. Under heavy CPU load, the story changes a bit. The Evo RGB hung out in the cooler section of the case metrics, with CPU temps at 74 degrees Celsius and GPU temps at 26. The Evo's protege managed to keep in lockstep with its master, and we do love to see that. As for 1440p gaming benchmarks, the Evo RGB showed exactly what it learned from the Evo, while proving its right to become the Evo's successor, with CPU temps at 45 degrees Celsius and GPU thermal performance averaging 54 degrees Celsius. The Evo RGB not only bests the Evo, it comes in at a closer contender for top position in all of our charts, with CPU temps 1 degree greater than the NZXT H6 Flow and GPU temps 5 degrees Celsius lower. That is not an insignificant amount. Now that we know how the Evo RGB performs, let's talk a bit about building in it and some things that we learned along the way. Starting with something completely different. We're gonna sidebar here. Lian Li's brand new fans. While we didn't use them in our tests because we wanted to stick to our standards for comparisons and make sure you can compare this against other cases, we did use them for our showcase shots. So these are Lian Li's 2 new fans, the UniFan TL and the UniFan TL LCD. Both of these fans follow Lian Li's recent design philosophy of limiting cables, performant air cooling, and customizable lighting. While the TL fans have an open center to give builders a peek at the fluid dynamic bearings and copper shielding, the TL LCD fans have a customizable LCD in the center of the fans for pictures of your dogs, of Brian as a hamster, Robey as a cat, or Pac-Man. Robey, great rabbit trail, but what about the case? Well, come on, those fans were cool. Fine. Overall, the o11 Evo RGB is as straightforward to build in as any other Lian Li case, which means that you will need to be aware of your cabling. Honestly, this is where fans like Lian Li's new TL120s and TL120 LCDs can help with reducing the number of cables in need of managing. I know I probably sound like a broken record at this point, but seriously, with the number of options out there for these kind of fans, there is no reason not to use a unified fan system if you're building a PC today, especially one that limits the number of cables. Since we're talking about cable management, we did run into a slight issue getting the cable management cover to stay closed. While it is held in place by a magnet, dude, the magnet needs some help. If you get lazy with your cable management and you don't zip tie your cables down really well, the magnet will not be able to keep the cover closed. This may not sound like a big deal, but if that tray sticks out even a little bit, it can keep the back panel from securing in place. While we're talking about cable, Lian Li's decision to bump the hard drive cage out ever so slightly was actually a good move. Because of its new home, there's a little bit more space for SATA cables and power cables to have a more direct pathway to the main cable tie down. As for the hard drive mounting plates that I was talking about, for the side fan mounts, we're not really sure we can recommend using them. PC cases that draw in air from the side work hard enough without anything like thick metal plates getting in the way. Not good for cooling options. If you're gonna do a NAS, get a NAS, buy a NAS, don't use this case. Speaking of brackets, we need to talk a bit about the top bracket for a moment. As we were building, and I don't know why Lian Li did this, but we noticed the top bracket was held in place by 2 small tabs and a few screws. Since we've built in a number of Lian Li cases over the year, we noticed that the bracket was a bit different than the ones we've seen in the past, and we have some concerns that this bracket needs to be perfectly positioned, just ever so slightly balanced. Don't even put it off a notch, otherwise it will easily fall to the top and kill your kids. Okay, maybe not kill your kids, but honestly, it has the real chance to fall. I really don't know Lian why they changed this. Their original design was actually really good. Like the o11 Evo XL and the o11 Vision, the motherboard tray has a few different positions it can be mounted in. However, unlike the Evo XL, the PCIe brackets do not move with the tray, which can create some mounting problems for things like GPUs. For example, because the Evo RGB can use micro ATX and mini ITX motherboards, depending on where the motherboard's PCI slots are located, some of the HDMI or display ports may get blocked by the PCI brackets. While there are a lot of things that we liked about the ability to move brackets and reposition things within the case, we just want to make sure builders are aware that not every part is going to work in every orientation for the brackets, which, I mean, come on, that's no surprise. This may or may not be an issue. However, if you're planning on using either Lian's vertical or upright GPU mounting brackets, it's just something to be aware of. There is a lot of things that we really liked about the o11 Evo RGB. After all, it's a Lian case. And again, evolution and their ability to listen to customer feedback is awesome. These things always turn out gorgeous if you take the time to manage the cables and you don't go overboard with crazy large components and size. In a lot of ways, the Evo RGB actually felt a lot like the Vision, which turned out absolutely stunning once we were done with it also. It does, and it has more of that classic o11 look. What wasn't like the Vision, and we love the Evo RGB for this, is that it actually handled thermals really well for a side intake case. But you know what? It could actually get even better. Lian has a front mesh kit that can support 320mm, 340mm, or 260mm fans for a monstrous amount of air intake and the potential of doing an air-cooled build. I guess Lian has heard us talking about their o11 cases not being great for air coolers, but this will have to be a video for another time. So, is the o11 Evo RGB ready to take on the mantle of its former master? You know what? We think so, but we also think that the Evo RGB has enough that is unique to it for more of an evolution from the Evo than it was a copy. As we wrap this up, these were our impression of Lian's o11 Evo RGB, but we want to know what you think about it. How would you build in the Evo successor? Let us know all of that down in the comments below. Now, while you're down there, go ahead and slap that subscribe button with that like button and ring that notification bell so that you get a notification each and every time we post a video like this here at Robeytech. And if you want to have questions or discussions about this, head over to our Discord server, discord.gg/Robeytech. Make a friend. Build an o11 together. I heard it connects you spiritually. And then you could be the bestest of friends. Anyway, guys, thanks for watching. Follow me at Robeytech absolutely everywhere, and we look forward to seeing you on the next one.